welcome to San Diego Public Library's How To Festival series. My name is Craig, and my pronouns are they, them, and I'm a library assistant for the Humanities section at the Central Library downtown. Today I'll be teaching you how to bind a miniature hardcover book by hand, and it'll look something like this. Thank you for watching. I know you could click on any video on the internet, but you chose to be here, and I genuinely appreciate that. First, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'll jump into the video. As part of my career at the library, I'm proud to serve as a co-chair on the citywide LGBTQ+ Employee Alliance, as well as a co-chair for the library's Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee. But I like to say I have 2.5 jobs because I also work as a property manager for the apartments where I live, and I sell artwork and write blogs when I have time on the side. And when I'm not wearing my many work hats, I like to spend time in the art studio that I share with my best friend, and I snuggle with my 2 cats, and I watch an excessive amount of superheroes on TV. And, well, I find time to sleep when I can. At last year's How To Festival, I taught y'all how to sculpt a miniature bee out of polymer clay, and he looked a little something like this. But this year, I'm going to be bringing you something a little bit more advanced, book binding. When I started working at Central, I had the opportunity to visit our rare books room up on the 9th floor for the first time, and the miniature book collection just set me off. I was on a creative adventure from there on. I became determined to learn to bind my own books, both big and tiny. And I am happy to share with you that I've successfully done it. I learned how, and today I'll teach you how to, too. First, I'd like to go over the supplies we need. You'll start with a pencil with a good eraser, and a Sharpie if you have one lying around. And then you will need at least 8 pieces of standard 8.5 by 11 paper, and add 2 more pieces of decorative paper for your cover pages. Those don't have to be, you don't have to buy them pre-decorated. Like, I'm going to be using marble paper today, but you can just decorate 2 more pieces of 8.5 by 11 if that's what you have at home. You'll also need a craft knife, an X-Acto knife, and scissors, or scissors if you have them. And then clamps, like workshop clamps, are the best thing to use to press your books. But today I'm going to be using a flower press that I got from a store in Grossmont. Or if you'll most likely have these at home, you can use binder clips as well. Or if you have a toolbox lying around, it might have these little clippies in it. Feel free to use those as well. I am a very big advocate for using what you have at home. You do not have to buy a lot of stuff to learn how to do things by yourself. You will also need a selection of scrap cardboard. I used the box from here at the library from one of our boxes of handy wipes. You can use whatever you have. If you've gotten a package from Amazon or whatever, should do. In our case, it should be relatively thin. You can use the like a tissue box or a cereal box, whatever works. And then you will also need a needle. That can be a regular type needle, but they also sell these rounded needles, which I didn't know until I started this project, or till I started learning bookbinding. And they look like a little half moon situation. These are really helpful in the type of sewing that we will be doing, so if you happen to can get your hands on one, feel free, but a regular needle should work, no worries. You will also need a push pin of some sort, sewing pin, a push pin from your corkboard, or whatever you have. Again, doesn't take a lot of money to get started crafting. You will need some waxed thread, so you can use normal thread, but make sure you go in with either a candle or beeswax and rub wax over it. But it's easier to just buy pre-waxed thread in this case. And then you will also need bookbinding glue. This is the one specialty item that I do recommend that you buy, but in a pinch you can use Elmer's glue. The only caveat with that is that it will not last as long. So it will not end up looking like the rare books in our rare books room. It won't survive from the 1600s to now if you use Elmer's glue. But so most bookbinders use a PVA glue, but yeah, like I said, you can use Elmer's glue while you're learning the tricks of the trade. You'll also need a glue safe paintbrush. These get really sticky really fast and they are kind of hard to clean, so I wouldn't use any of the paintbrushes that you normally use with your other paints at home. I would use something that you don't mind getting kind of grimy. Our last two things are book cloth and binder's tape. So you can use pretty much any kind of fabric as long as it will live up to the glue. I bought a random sample pack from Amazon that had a bunch of different types of book cloth in it, including a little bit of faux leather. But you can use any kind of cloth that you have at home. And then you will also need binder's tape, which is, again, a specialty product, but something you might already have at home that's very similar material to this is cheesecloth if you do any kind of cooking, or if you have gauze in your first aid kit, same thing, or similar enough. Some alternatives or extras that you might find helpful while you're doing this project today is a bone folder, which helps you make the folds really flat when you're folding your paper. But you don't need one of these. A ruler works just fine. But if you have a bone folder lying around, feel free to use it. Like I said, we will be using flower presses and binder clips, but if you have clamps at home, feel free to use those. Another alternative or an extra that bookbinders use is what they call an awl. But like I said, we are going to be using a push pin today because that works just as well. You can also add decorative bits to your book. I added a ribbon to my sample. You can also add things like a little lock or a keychain, whatever works for you. And then also another decorative piece is the bookbinder's headband. You might notice this in your books at home, the piece that goes right there, and you might not if you're not as nerdy as I am, but there is an extra piece right in here between the spine and the actual text block of the book, and that's what this is. But you don't need that. It's purely decorative, so don't worry about it. So we are going to get into the steps of binding your first miniature book. You will start by taking your 8 to 10 pages of 8.5 by 11, and you will fold this into 8 equal parts. So that's once along the short edge, like so. Then again along the long edge. Like so. And then you open it and you fold the top half. I'll show you. Fold the top half in like so. And then the bottom half of the bottom half in like so. And then you should have roughly 8 equal parts. You're going to do that 8 to 10 times, and then when you're ready, you are going to cut those 8 to 10 pieces into as evenly as you can into a piece that's about this big. When you have these, this is what we're going to turn into a folio, which will be the pages of your book, which is basically just folding it one more time like that. See, it's already getting the shape of a book. When you have 2 to 4 folios, it's going to look something like this. And you are going to line those up really carefully and make sure that all of their spines come together as evenly as possible. What we don't want is creep around the edges. You can put 2 to 4 folios together. If you get more than that, it will start to creep around the edges. So when you when you fold a folio and then you nest 4 folios, that makes a signature. You are going to make between 6 and 8 signatures, and depending on how many pages you want in your final book, make as many signatures as you like. But I suggest for a regular amount of thickness to do between 6 and 10. I'm going to do 8. When you have 6 to 10 signatures folded and stacked together, and you are going to mark the sides of your signatures in equal intervals. You just take a Sharpie, and when you're laying against the table, you just mark it along the sides like so. And then we will move to the next step, which basically you take the first page of your signature that you just put the marking on, and then you're going to move it to the inside. You can more easily puncture your equally spaced holes into your signature. So it is going to look something like that. I have this handy dandy tool that I got with my awl that helps make equal markings, but to keep us on the same playing field, what I did before I got that tool was you can use a piece of cardboard to keep your signature lined up, because you want it as even as you can. You want your hole to go straight out of the spine. You don't want it to go out of the back or the front. So we're going to use a folded piece of cardboard to keep ourselves there. So it's going to look something like that. And then you can, if you have an awl, you can use it, or we can use a push pin to push holes straight through your signatures. And again, try to go straight through the spine and not out the back or the front. And you're going to proceed to do that until you get through all of your signatures. And then, once we go from there, we are going to sew everything together. And now that we have finished poking the holes in all of our signatures, we can begin sewing. You will start with your waxed thread. You want about the length from the end of your arm to your clavicle, according to one video that I watched. And this just makes it easier and less tangly as you go along. So you're gonna cut that in half, or not cut that in half, fold that in half, and then cut. And then you are going to thread your needle and pull it about halfway down. And then you are going to double knot one end of your thread. take one of your signatures and thread through the first hole. The knot should be on the outside and should stop your thread from going all the way through. So once your thread is coming out of the inside of your signature, you're going to go back in through the second. You are going to go back out of the second hole, like so, and then into the third hole, out of the fourth, into the fifth, and so on. And then when you get to the end of your signature, your inside should look something like this, and your outside should look something like this. You're going to keep going. Your thread should be coming out the inside, and then you can keep going to thread back down into the next hole, and you'll begin threading back across until you have two fully threaded rows, one on the outside and one on the inside. And then what I like to do when I get to the end of the row at the end, your thread will be on the inside, but we need it on the outside to connect the second signature. So I will usually loop it in that last loop, just to secure it a bit, and then you push it back down in that last hole, and you are now on the outside of your signature. So, one full row of threading, one full row of threading. And then we will connect our second signature. So take your second signature and your first signature, and you are going to make sure the dots are still lined up. When you want to create the loop for your third signature, it's going to be very similar to making the loop for your second. You will be exiting your second signature and going into your third. If I can do it. And then you come out through the second hole, and then instead of looping it around this braid, you're going to put it in between the space between the two signatures, like in between the loop between the two signatures. And then, similarly to what you did the first time, you go back into that same hole and continue sewing. So, let me show you one more time. You go inside to the outside, you hook into the space between the two signatures, and that's why the rounded needle is helpful in this situation. And then you go back into the hole that it just came out of, and so on and so forth. And for every signature after this one, that is how you are going to add it on. And then we will prepare to glue the text block all together. So when you're ready, your text block goes in your clamp or in your flower press or binder clips or whatever it is that you're going to use to glue that down. And you will glue along the edge of the spine and let it sit. When it's dry, you are going to, like mine is right now, you are going to affix the headbands and the book binder's cloth, and you are going to let that dry on the clamp, or in, you can even use 2 heavy books if that's what you have. And then we are going to move on to finish the book cover. You will need 3 pieces of cardboard, 2 that are the size of 1/2 of one of your folios, and 1 that is the size of your text block. And the piece of book cloth that you're going to affix it to should be between 1/4 of an inch and 1/2 inch wider than your cardboard pieces. And you're just going to glue one side of the cardboard to the book cloth. Sometimes this process can get a little bit sticky. If you're using faux leather, you might have to do what I do, which is basically clamp the cardboard while it's glued with binder clips. And then you're going to let that dry. And when it is dry, you are going to affix this to your cover pages. So it will look something like this. And you will affix the text block. You will glue on the inside of here, and you will affix the text block in here like so. And when you are ready, that will look something like this. It may or may not have binder clips on it. And then you will put that back in your press to sit something like this overnight. You might have binder clips, you might have books, but they are going to sit pressed as tight together as you can possibly get them, and you're going to let them sit overnight. Hopefully those 3 layers, the text block, the book binder's tape or gauze or cheesecloth, whatever you used, and the book cloth will adhere together overnight. And in the end, you should have something that looks a little bit like this. And that has been my presentation on how to bind a miniature hardcover book by hand. I hope you learned something. I hope you joined us at our live event on May 14th. But if you did not, here you are on YouTube. And I would also like to suggest that you, once again, that you visit the Rare Book Room, and you'll be inspired just the way that I was. Another option is our Idea Lab here on the 4th floor at the Central Library. They have a lot of cool machines that you can add decorative options to. My next venture is going to be using the heat press vinyl to start adding what will look like gold embossing to the fronts, the covers to my miniature books. But I hope you learned something. Thanks for joining me. Have a good one.